Hey, warm welcome back to you. You have joined PGL's offline qualifier, the final step before the Krakow Major, of course, in a few weeks' time. Game 1 in the history books, Game 2 almost upon us. And back at the desk with Janko, now rejoined by a new face. You've never met this man before in your life. At least not in this shape, anyway. Good morning, Moses. How you doing? Well, good afternoon now, as it's just crept over incredibly.
It went long, didn't it?
Yeah, it did go very long.
Right through breakfast.
Yeah.
Love to see it. Yeah, love to see it.
Yeah. Game 2 features some of your countrymen, of course.
Yeah.
But it's I like the fact that things are starting to mix up a bit. We've seen this in other games, Dota in particular, but not so much in Counter-Strike in previous years. Now, all of a sudden, in the last year, I guess, since FaZe showed some success, teams are now starting to experiment. They're starting to have multinational teammates in there, and Optic kind of going down that road a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's coming there, but I mean the North American teams are still a little bit resistant to it. I mean Mixwell's a nice switch up, but overall I think most of it actually isn't the North American teams. It's players from Europe. Like why would you want to come to North America and put yourself in that kind of a hell?
Money.
You just wouldn't want to do it. Yeah, well maybe money.
I mean Rush seems to be thinking that even practice is good in Europe compared to when I don't want to put too many words in his mouth, but he did say he enjoyed practicing in Europe.
Yeah, the practice schedule, obviously, there's a lot more teams that you can select from to scrim than in North America. More so than anything, it's like the pugging. It's everything even outside of practice, you know, the rank S, the FPL, whatever you play in. The players in Europe just take it a little bit more seriously. So it's got to be refreshing for him to like get out of like the YouTube content hell of the American rank S system and actually get people who want to play.
In terms of Optic gaming, where do you rate them right now? Difficult to assess.
Not very high. They've been in a free fall
yeah.
this whole year. Ever since Stanislaw left, they've had a really tough time. And I mean, 7th and 8th at ECS, 7th, 8th at EPL, and then you look even at Sydney and you say they got 3rd, 4th there. That looks good on paper, but all they did was beat Vici once and Chiefs twice to make it into that position. So I mean, they really haven't accomplished a whole lot. And I think part of it is really struggling with the in-game leadership part. One thing Stan brought was like that convincing mid-round call of like, this is where we're going, and everyone kind of knew it. The big thing we saw at the end of last year with Optic was Rush. Like his step up to being that 3rd star in the team is kind of what marked their ability to compete internationally, and he's taken a big step back. And it's not necessarily individually his fault, but without the in-game leader as an entry fragger, you notice that confidence really start to slip. All of his stats have just dropped off by fair margin ever since Stanislaw's departure.
And switching gears to our European counterparts, in terms of Penta, it is an international team, very much so. 4 different nationalities in amongst this lot of couple of Finns, an Estonian, a Pole, who am I forgetting? Of course, the German Crystal in the team. It seems to be working okay, at least online for this team. They did well at the European minor as well, came through, didn't lose a match until they got to the grand final and came up against a very strong, kind of hot big at the time. But other than that, they've not really shown us too much outside of online stuff.
It's true, but I mean, for this Penta lineup, it's the best lineup they've had for a very long time. They've tried with different iterations of the roster, mostly sticking with German players, but you know, I think that's why in North America we see this shift as well. People have realized that, you know, bringing experienced players and trying something with them again after, you know, 3 different times it didn't work doesn't really make much sense. So let's just get someone who's young, up and coming talent, who we see that has like good mechanical skills, has potential, you know, throw them into the fire and see how they will manage it. It seems like this like Penta team with all these different nationalities is actually managing really well. They had that Global Challenge LAN as well, but they did play against Big too. That time they beat them in the grand finals. So I think they are, I would expect them to be satisfied with what this roster is achieving so far.
Well, we'll take a look at their lineup on the screen in a moment. You had Penta kind of on that bubble, as in they could break into the top 8, but they could also fail miserably. Why is that? Yeah,
initially, I mean, they have a couple of strengths. One, people are going to underestimate them. Like, you know, every team is pretty much going to underestimate them. 2, they have a fairly deep map pool. They can play, you know, a fair number of maps. And 3, it just seems like individually they're playing really well. Like the likes of Sunny, he's been on a tremendous run recently. Those are the most dangerous teams, obviously, in this format. The best of 1, they can play any map, so you have to play them on something that you're probably not going to be comfortable on. They're unpredictable, and if they're playing well individually, it's just, you know, one of those styles where you look back to maybe that Peter team, like with Waylander all the way back, when you have just one guy that comes out and, you know, has 30 kills out of nowhere, and you just lose a game because you have no idea what that team is capable of.
In terms of maps, Jason, Both teams have all 7 maps in the pool in terms of what they've played over the last few months, but Optic's results have been pretty dismal on 3 or 4 of those, haven't they?
Yeah, it's been dwindling, especially when you look at you know, a map like Train is something they always go to. They have a losing record on that. But they're playing some of the harder competition on that map. But maps like Overpass and Inferno, they've shown a willingness to play. Overpass, especially in their good run at the end of last year, is a map that they showed they could compete on, and that's kind of something they had an edge over some of the other top 10 teams that they were competing with at the time. That's dropped off. They're winless in the last 3 months on that. I think this is going to go towards like a Mirage or even an Inferno. Their maps, I mean, that even with not a great record for Optic, they're going to be willing to play it. They've shown recently that they want to get better on that map. So Mirage is kind of in the middle ground in these BO1s that it could really land on.
Interesting. They've played 14 times over the last 3 months. They've won 71% of their Mirage games, their highest win rate of any of the maps that they've got. Unfortunately for them, Penta's best map is also Mirage, so I guess maybe they probably won't want to play that.
I just don't think either team's going to ban it.
Yeah.
I think they're
okay. Well, actually, sorry, Janko. Let's just take a look at the map, Vito, because I believe we do have them. Train. Everyone's going for Train. Feed the Train.
Optic
look, it's Train. What do you know?
Nice.
There was no prior knowledge
the
on
thing
that
is,
either,
like, because Optic, like, yes, they've been playing Mirage lately, but historically, it's not their comfort pick. Unlike Train. Like, Train has been always a map that they've played a lot. You know, Train, Cobble, Overpass are probably the first 3 maps that come to mind when you talk about Optic. And for Penta, interestingly enough, it's also their most played map. Not the most successful one statistically, but you know, again, it's a map that they are going to be comfortable on as well. So this is where neither team, like, you know, took any huge risks coming to the Vito. They're just going for what their comfort zone is pretty much.
Do you know what I like about this as well? It's got an anomaly here. The only map that they share the same win rate on
is Train.
Yep.
Nice.
66.7% win rate, both of them.
Yeah, the interesting thing about
the
that
last
is
3 months.
you look at Optic, right? They have 16-1 loss to SK, 16-4 loss to FaZe, and their wins are like two times against Chiefs, once against Vici Gaming, right? Those are their LAN results on the map. I think all of them were actually at IEM Sydney when Hayes was like a stand-in at that tournament. So nothing, you know, incredible to write home about. Penta, at least, even online, beat VP in that relegation
but
game.
But that's VP online, Janko. Come on, don't stress it up too much.
Come on, I'm trying to, you know,
gotta hype the matchup.
Hype up the boys. Hype up the boys.
No, but I mean, even back in the day, like when Stan was always still on this team, Train was a map that Optic always liked going to, and it lended itself to their style at the time. The big thing is I mean, I had Penta and Optic are kind of like those cusp teams, as you mentioned earlier, that like either one I feel could actually make it out of this qualifier into the major. I have Optic going, but Penta's definitely an upset team for that kind of a situation. But I mean, if you're Optic, I'm just going to harp on the rush issue, just because these last 3 months, his rating in openings has been atrocious, especially opening kills. And you think for someone who's an entry fragger, who, especially on a map like Train, where you want to get that kill and get onto the bomb site quickly and push forward, you need those opening guys to really do the work for you. You need them to open up space for everyone who's going to follow up. And if Rush isn't doing that work, it doesn't seem like there's a consistent player behind that to kind of pick up the slack. So for me, if he's not showing up, especially on Train, that's a nightmare scenario just waiting to happen.
Okay, Penta have been a much more consistent team over the last month or so in terms of the people standing up. Let's see how they work out. Let's bring our commentary team back in. Gents, long first one. Have you had time to rest?
Yeah, I think we're good to go. We had
we're so chilled. It's like, yeah, we're fine. Game two, just very quickly, while I've got all 4 of you here, in one word, which way does this go? Janko. It's
Penta.
not a difficult question.
Yeah, he's thinking of all the words he could have said there.
One word, Optic or Penta?
I'm gonna go Optic.
Okay.
Optic for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, Optic.
Okay, so 3 Optics, 1 Penta. I like that though. Janko's got a bit of faith in our European.
I'm just waving the flag.
Well, yeah.
That's always the excuse,
he's still
isn't
waving
it?
the flag.
I am waving the flag of the European Union because I want to be there one day.
Yeah, Brexit. That's all I'm going to say.
By then,
and on that political note, we'll hand it